I will talk now about the eclipse of the true church. For 60 years, we have witnessed the eclipse of the true church by an anti-church that has progressively appropriated her name, occupied the Roman Curia and her dicasteries, dioceses and parishes, seminaries and universities, convents and monasteries. The anti-church has usurped her authority, and its ministers wear her sacred garment. It uses her prestige and power to appropriate her treasure, assets, and finances. Just as happened in nature, this eclipse does not take place all at once. It passed from light to darkness when a celestial body inserts itself between the sun and us. This is a relatively slow but inexorable process in which the moon of the anti-church follows its orbit until it overlaps the sun, generating a cone or shadow that projects over the earth. We now find ourselves in this doctrinal, moral, liturgical, and disciplinary cone or shadow. It is not yet the total eclipse that we'll see at the end of time, under the reign of the Antichrist, but it's a partial eclipse, which let us see the luminous crown of the sun encircling the black disk of the moon. The process that led to the today eclipse of the Church began with the modernism, without a doubt. The anti-church followed its orbit despite the solemn condemnations of the magisterium, which in that phase shone with the splendor of truth. But with the Second Vatican Council, the darkness of this spurious entity came over the Church. Initially, it obscured only a small part, but darkness gradually increased. Whoever then pointed to the sun, deducing that the moon would certainly obscure it, was accused of being a prophet of doom, with those forms of fanaticism and intemperance that arise from the ignorance and prejudice. The case of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and a few other prelates confirms, on one hand, the far-sightedness of these shepherds, and, on the other hand, the disjointed reaction of their adversaries, who, out of fear of losing power, using all their authority to deny the evidence and kept hidden their own true intention. To continue the analogy, we can say that in the sky of the faith, an eclipse is a rare and extraordinary phenomenon. But to deny that during the eclipse darkness spreads, just because this does not happen under ordinary conditions, is not a sign of faith in the effectibility of the Church, but rather an obstinate denial of the evidence or bad faith. The Holy Church, according to Christ's promises, will never be overwhelmed by the gates of hell. but does not mean that she will not be, or is not already, overshadowed by her infernal forgery, the anti-church. That moon, not by chance, we see under the feet of a woman in the book of the Revelation. I quote, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars." The moon is under the feet of the woman, with above all mutability, above all earthly corruption, above the law of fate and the kingdom of the spirit of this world. And this is because that woman, who is at once the image of Mary most holy and of the Church, is a micta sole, clothed with the Son of the righteousness that is Christ, exempted from all demonic power, as she takes part in the mystery of the immutability of Christ, as St. Ambrose wrote. She remained unbruised, if not in her militant kingdom, certainly in the suffering one and the purgatory, and in the triumphant ones in paradise. St. Jerome, commenting on the words of Scripture, reminds us that the gates of hell are sins and vices, especially the teaching of heretics. We know, therefore, that even the synthesis of all heresies represented by modernism and its updated conciliar versions can never definitively obscure the splendor of the bride of Christ, but only for a brief period of the eclipse, that Providence, in His infinite wisdom, has allowed to draw from it a greater good.